the most offloads per game with 3.1. These are just successful offloads, obviously.
Yeah.
Not ones that result in a knock-on, actually.
Yeah.
Cuthbertson, Bateman, Sims and Junior Moores, they all had more than 2 per game played. 67 players didn't have a successful offload. Ben Flower playing the most games without one. 17 times he played in the regular season and not a successful offload amongst them.
Any news on how many offloads Dane Tilse might have made this season?
Do you know what? I'm gonna put together a
Dane Tilse stat.
Yeah, a Dane stat line for next week. I'm sure everyone will want to know his redeeming features, you see, and where he ranks in all the Super League players.
I imagine
doing that.
He's probably a top bloke.
The game with the most successful offloads, and it was the season opener actually, Leeds versus Warrington with 40, which isn't that surprising because it was before Leeds themselves knew how shit they were going to be this year.
Yeah.
So they stuck to the plan of previous seasons.
Before we knew how shit they were going to be.
In terms of metres next, Ken Seo actually was the person who ended the regular season with the most metres, 3,028.
Wow.
Justin Carney, though, had the most metres per game played, 147.7 metres per game. Matty Russell also had over 140 metres per game played, so well done to them. 42 players in total averaged over 100 metres per game. Hill, Walmsley, Amor, Cudjoe and Rapira, so 4 props there and a centre, all averaged over 100 metres per game, having played in all 23 games. That's a remarkable consistency, you would have to say.
Yeah.
Darryl Clark had the best average gain, though. That's metres per carry. He did that with 10.82 metres per carry. That was across the whole league. That was including players who only played 1 game. That's on 207 carries over 21 games. He managed to achieve that. That's some good going. Stan Robin, Fuad Yaha, Chris and Inu, and Brad Mills, is it? Does Mills play at Wakefield? The other 3 are Catalan players, we know that for sure. Yeah. They also averaged over 10 metres per carry through the regular season. Didn't play as many games, obviously, as Darryl Clark, though. The game with the most metres was Hull KR versus Widnes in round 14. That had over 3,000 metres. That's the only game this season that did.
Right.
Second closest was a metre short.
Okay.
The game with the best average gain, though, was Castleford versus Warrington in round 22. The average gain for every carry in that whole game was 8.5 metres per carry.
Wow.
So there was obviously a lot of end-to-end stuff in that one. Carries next. Not an exciting or exotic stat, really. It shows who's worked really hard. Dan Sargentson, with 401 carries, had the most carries in Super League this year. Like I've said many times during the season, is been getting flogged.
They don't want to send him down to Gold Coast in any sort of shape, do they?
No. So on top of that, his 20.1 carries per game was the highest figure for anyone. He was actually followed in the ranks in that number by Wigan colleagues John Bateman and Anthony Gelling as well, who were also, big effort men. Right, we're going to move on to kicking now. So there's a range of things to cover in kicking.
Yes.
We're going to start with the most exciting kick in the game, the 40-20. Danny Brough with 4 kicked the most 40-20s this year. 23 players kicked a 40-20 and 36 40-20s were kicked in total. I haven't looked to check how that compares with other years.
Right.
So that's a bit of a dull stat, but it's still quite exciting to know that if you go to, you got a good chance of seeing one per round sort of thing.
That's
or
it.
1.5 per round.
There you go. Attacking kicks then.
Mark Snade made the most attacking kicks, which is unsurprising because he seemed to be the main and only kicker in his side. 156, that was 30 more than the next most by any other player. 6 players in total have more than 100 attacking kicks. Mark Snade actually averaged 6.8 per game. Kevin Brown and Danny Brough also had an average of more than 6 per game. So it shows which teams have very much a designated kicker.
Yeah.
Mark Snade kicked the most goals. That's a good stat for him, 94. Pat Richards, unfortunately for him in his last season, missed the most goals in the regular season, 29. 9 players kicked 100% of their goals successfully.
Right.
Declan Patton had the most goals with 5.
Okay.
So he kicked 5 from 5. Yeah. Thomas Bosk had the best goal success rate of players who kicked double figures of goals. So he kicked at 86.7%. He had 13 successful goals and 2 misses. 10 players kicked over 50 goals in the regular season, and Mark Snade had the best success rate of those, 83.9%. So all in all, Mark Snade's been the most influential kicker on all the sort of scales you would look at really this season.
There you go.
He was one of the 23 with a 40-20 as well, of course. Defensive number now. We're going to do tackles, and it was Danny Houghton. Yeah, mate. 1,000.
Yeah, mate. Again, you won't have watched it back, will you?
Well, fuck.
Yeah, he was yeah, mating all over the place on Friday night.
1,017 tackles in the regular season, and that came out at the best average, most tackles per game as well, 44.2. That's the sterling effort, and he backs it up year on year on year. Does he? Yeah, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, mate.
Someone who is a surprising stat if you've not been following the Super League pod this year probably is Jamie Jones-Buchanan. He made the most marker tackles this season, even though he missed the first 4 or 5 rounds. 172 he made. Jamie Jones-Buchanan also had the most marker tackles per game, therefore 9.1. That's nearly 10 marker tackles per game. That's massive.
Yeah, a huge effort, isn't it? For a man of his age and injury history as well.
Yeah, and not playing 80 minutes a game, and the effort he's putting into the spells he's on the pitch is remarkable, really, you've got to say. 13 players had a 100% tackle success rate this season.
Right.
Feka Paliasina, with 34 tackles, made the most tackles without missing any, so obviously none of the big tacklers were involved in those stats. Of players who played more than half the game, so this gives you a better impression.
Yeah.
So played at least 12 games in the regular season. Chris Hill had the best tackle success rate, 98.5% with 716 tackles and only 117 misses in 23 games. I think that's...
Is that right?
716 successful tackles.
Right, okay.
Sorry.
I see.
Yeah. Do those numbers not add up? I don't know.
I'm not sure that they do. I don't think
they don't.
I don't think
they don't at all. So it must have been... I don't know what I've written down. I must have mistyped somewhere.
Is it 11.7 perhaps? Or 17 misses?
17 is more likely, isn't it?
Yeah. That's more likely to be 1.5% of...
No. But yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. 98.5 is the key figure. I don't know what I've written. I've gone off.
You got off-piste.
I've made a mistake there, obviously. Jacob Miller missed the most tackles, 77. But Albert Kelly missed the most tackles per game, 4.1. Which,
Actually, when you think of how much people run at him, though, how many tackles he's been... I know he's missing 4.1, but if you think how many tackles is he being forced to make a game...
Well, yeah, probably both of those two players are in that sort of category. Yeah. But it does also spell out why they're playing in Super League and not the NRL.
Perhaps.
Of the players who played more than half the games, Adam Swift had the worst tackle success with 72.3%. Obviously, too busy chasing his tail, bless him.
That's it, yeah.
The team with the best overall tackle success was Warrington, 93.7%. The worst, unsurprisingly, was Hull KR, 91.7%. We've often talked in the last 2 years about Hull KR's deficiencies in the tackling, sticking to tackles department.
Yeah.
The game with the best tackle success overall was Wigan versus Catalan in round 1. 96.1% of tackles in the entire game were made successfully by across all players averaged out.
Right.
More bad stuff.
Bad stats.
Errors. 22 players. Oh no, this is
a good stat, isn't it?
Yeah, 22 players made no handling errors in the regular season. Lama Tassi played the most games without 116 and had the most carries, 160, without an error. Callum Watkins made the most errors. He made 40. David Thompson and Jared Simpson both made 3 errors per game, but they only played in 1 game each. Of the players playing more than half the games, it was Albert Kelly who made the most errors, 2.1.
Right, okay.
The game with the most errors was top of the table, Warrington versus Hull FC in round 18. That had 41 errors. Everyone remembers that scrum a minute affair. Salford versus Warrington and St Helens versus Hull FC had the fewest errors. Their games, they only had 9 in those 2 games.
Right.
So both teams have redeemed themselves at other stages of the season, which doesn't surprise you when you see the place they are in the league table. Let's hope the Challenge Cup final isn't a repeat of that knock-on-a-thon, though.
Yes.
And then finally, penalties. 51 players did not give away a single penalty. Tom Lynham played the most games without conceding a penalty at 18. Alex Gerrard made the most tackles without giving away a penalty, and often tackles are, penalties are given away in tackles more often than not, I suppose. Yes. 144 tackles without giving away a penalty, so good discipline from Stevie's misses there. John Wilkin conceded the most penalties with 28. Scott Moore conceded the most penalties per game with 1.9. Obviously, his game time was seriously hampered by the amount of penalties he gave away, which kind of curtailed his rush for records in that category.
There comes a point where you're just such a penalty machine that you can't bring your stats up any higher then. Because you've been banned.
There has to be, doesn't there? 48 different players had a sin bin in this year. Justin Carney with 3 had the most.
He was being chased by Dave Fifita then, wasn't he?
He only had 1, didn't he?
He got binned at the weekend, didn't he?
Oh, God.
Oh, that's Challenge Cup, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, he's already on 2, and he's only been here 6 weeks.
5 red cards were handed out across the season. No one had more than 1. Green at Hull KR, Scott Moore and Heremiah in the same game. Wardle at Huddersfield and Sean O'Loughlin, probably most famously. All got there. I wouldn't talk about Green's season being over, did we? From the Seguiaro shoulder charge. If that was a Wigan player who'd done it to him, I'm sure everyone would be crying about the RFL protecting Wigan players.
We've just shaken this off, Mark. We're just shaking this off. Do we need to bring it back again?
We should have fully shaken it off if people read the blogs.
Absolutely. I haven't got it in me to rile you into another rant yet.
I'm not going to go on one. I'm just calling it out. The game with the most penalties was, unsurprisingly, that Widnes versus Wakefield game with 26 in that game, and I'd blame the players rather than the referee on that count. Okay, so on to Rich Langley's questions. He was the only one who got in touch with the questions, but that's great to have some of those. He's put some initial stat questions, so I'm expecting more.
Yeah.
Off the back of the numbers we've been given and some of those pieces. Okay, so last year at the same time we actually had an Ask SLP. It turns out, and in one of the questions he asked who were the players who committed the most missed tackles and the players who committed the most penalties. And we ended up with a turnstile 13 and a naughty boy 13.
Yeah.
And then I have thrown in a Butterfingers 13 as well, because I'm with errors per game, because I'm pretty sure at some point later in the year
we did that.
We talked about that, but I just couldn't find it in the rundowns.
Yeah.
So he's asked who was a repeat offender from the same turnstile or naughty boy team from last year, and we have got a few.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll run through the turnstile team first. At fullback is Shannon McDonnell. He's tackling at less than 76%. On the wings, Adam Swift, we already know, has had a poor tackle success record.
Yeah.
Curtis Norton is the other winger, both tackling at comfortably below 80%.
Yeah.
Usually with wingers you do get it to be a little bit lower, and fullbacks because they don't make as many tackles, so there's more percentage skew, but still these figures are obviously low to be the worst. And in the centres we've got Dominique Peyrou and Ian Thornley, both tackling around 84%. In the halves, we have, unsurprisingly, Jacob Miller. He's tackling at 84.1% though, so not as bad as maybe you'd be expecting with the amount of missed tackles he made. So that speaks to what you said, that a lot of people run him a lot. The other halfback, tackling at 75%, is Chris Sandow. In the front row, Alex Wormsley, he's a repeat offender. He was in this team last year, and he's in this team again. 90.8% of his tackles were successful. Brad Dwyer at hooker, 90.9%, and Willie Mason is probably a little bit less, surprisingly, because he's a bit of a lazy old fella.
Yeah.
He's in there as well. 91% of his tackles are successful. In the second row, Justin Horrow and repeat offender from last year, Setamata Sarr, both tackling below 90%, which is not good for a forward.
No.
Very few forwards hit those figures. In fact, these might have been the only 2 this year who'd played more than half games at that rate. John Wilkin is your loose forward, 92.7%.
There you go. Right, who are our filth merchants then?
Well, our penalty machines.
This is a rogues gallery, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's one name that I think is
surprising.
A couple of names that are surprising, especially the hooker with the volume of his as well. So we'll start at fullback as well, and do I even need to say Ben Kincaid's name?
He's a man that needs no introduction, but he'll sell you some Herbalife products and give you a swift kicking.
He's the only back in the competition to have conceded more than a penalty per game this season. On the wings, Justin Carney, he's a repeat offender from last year, and that is not a surprise. And Aaron Murphy, but they're only giving a penalty away every 2 games they play. In the centres, Ben Crooks and Jake Webster, so there's a little bit of a Castleford look to that, obviously. giving just less than a penalty a game away. There in the half, we have Maurice Blair and Luke Gale.
Yeah, that was surprising.